Good morning, people. Back from a couple of weeks of sailboat cruising, all tucked away here on the river. Nicely ducked in here just before the weather really started to meaningfully change. We're going to get a little rain. It looks like today. I was able to spend much of the day yesterday cleaning up a little damage on the teak in preparation for the change of the season. The trip was nice, weather was reasonably good, harbors were quiet, and caught some nice fish. All that went along pretty well. Really no drama to report on that score. Boat was great, all the systems worked just fine, and it was fun. It was nice to get away. As I'm typically prone to do before any given voyage, I have a tendency to indulge in consulting the I Ching as a thought experiment for perhaps what it is that I should contemplate over the duration of the voyage. And in this particular case, the I Ching came up with the result of Hexagram 54, which is Kwai Mei, typically described as the Marrying Maiden. That is a hexagram that has a certain amount of controversy that surrounds it. I've never found it to be that controversial, actually. It describes quite clearly the image or set of circumstances of a woman who might be relatively affluent and quite privileged and probably a pretty high status, but getting on later in years. Maybe she's in her early 50s. She seems to be completely unaware of the fact that the glory and privilege of her past is past sunset. She's carrying on in the manner that she is accustomed to, in the manner of a young woman, and it's not a very good look. She's still partying it up pretty hard. She's still running after the pool boy. What's absolutely most pernicious about this set of circumstances is that even though to everyone around her it looks silly, she may succeed in some of that for a while. But ultimately, the facts come to assert themselves, and eventually she ends up holding the bag for those exploits. Now, of course, it was about last year, about this time, that some of you might remember who have stuck around, that we were deep in the conversation about the loss of normalcy in our lives, and what that was going to entail. And I was making the case that this particular year would be the last year that would feel normal for us for the rest of our lives. This is, of course, before the YouTube channel got hacked and all the content deleted. Maybe some of that still exists out there somewhere. But of course, I was making the assertion that probably got me in trouble, that if one has an objective analysis of the moment, whether you are looking at the unsustainability of our economic systems, or the unsustainability of our impact on the global ecology, or the unsustainability of our population growth, right? Or the unsustainability of our consumptive habits leading to catastrophic scarcity across all sectors, including those with no substitutability whatsoever, like fuel and topsoil. Well, I had been making the assertion all along that if one is duly informed of these issues, it becomes quite conspicuous that there is no exit, right? And knowing that I know that, I'm certain that other individuals who have vastly more power than I know that. And the conclusion that I had drawn and had advocated for here was that there would be a necessity among powerful interests to engineer a controlled power down of the economy, because there was no other exit. It was not something that we could grow our way out of, either by monetary inflation or making up magic new resources. It was done. Okay, and for anyone who had a objective view of that, it was conspicuous that if you were to be honest and powerful, you would have to recognize that your choices were to have engineered controlled power down of the global economy, or you would run the risk of unengineered, uncontrolled power down in terms of what we would normally call collapse. The difference between those two states of controlled and uncontrolled really comes down to whether or not elite interests expect that they are going to retain the control and privilege they currently hold or not. If they are not proactive in engineering a collapse state for their benefit, there is a possibility of organic collapse states arising, and a real risk that their power and influence might be swept away in that event, as well as everything else. So again, my assertion was that from a strictly game theory point of view and looking at how things are unfolding, there really was no other option on the table rather than to engineer a controlled power down event. And I don't know, look around you. Tell me what it is that you see. Now, of the things in life that I have been most wrong about, this probably takes the cake. Like, having been involved in these low impact lifestyles, I guess we'll just call it that. Low impact lifestyles, high relatability lifestyles, maybe I should call them. Because often they're two sides of the same coin. I digress. Having been involved in this stuff for a long time now, I mean, at least 20 years, I guess. Certainly over that period of time, I had a certain amount of frustration about how one can communicate, I mean, really very, very basic, very, very obvious information to people who, like the woman in the image of the Marrying Maiden, are in denial about the sunset of certain circumstances in their life. I had believed, and this was my error, that as we got closer and the sunset became more obvious and we faded into darkness, that people would become more receptive to the information that is essential for their well-being and their future. And I could not have been more wrong. And this is precisely, again, mirroring the image of Kwai Mei, the Marrying Maiden, who, as this woman of privilege, in the same manner as our culture, moves into its sunset years. And the lack and the scarcity shows itself to be real, and the privilege of the past disappears. No awareness arises. In fact, what happens is a greater and more pernicious and more insistent form of denial, in fact. People become less persuadable facing this inevitability rather than more. That's startling. Of course, there's always a minority of individuals who are able to be persuaded by evidence, but they had been persuaded for a while anyway. It doesn't appear that anyone is changing their mind at this late moment. I find that extremely disquieting. So over the next couple of videos, what I want to discuss is a kind of a difficult issue. And it is this. Precisely why it is that our culture, our civilization, has chosen the destructive path that it has. Why? And why is it that most of the inhabitants of this culture and civilization are as truly insane as they are? And we will draw on a number of sources from that. Probably the works of Carl Jung, who put a lot of time and effort into this, surprisingly. That's not a thing that a lot of the current fabulous Jungian profiteers like to talk about, but Jung was completely apocalyptic, thinking that the egoism of our era would kill humanity. In fact, we're going to get into that from his point of view. It's probably necessary to look into the dynamics of relating as brought forward by Artie Lang. I would like to also kind of get into the profound insights of an author I think a great deal of, which is Peter Kingsley. Kingsley is important because he's one of the few scholars out there who have the depth of knowledge in antiquities whereby he can understand much of the source material by which Jung and, of course, Lang came to a certain set of circumstances and conclusions. And I guess I would add my own particular little spice on that too, because I found myself in much the same set of necessary conclusions, I guess, but through a completely different route, well outside of the realm of psychology, but rather my peculiar interest in trying to live lives that make quality relating possible rather than impossible. So we'll try. I'm a little trepidatious of taking the material on because it's a little heady, and certainly I hope that you understand that I am not an antiquities scholar nor a psychologist. I'm a dude that lives on his boat and values relating to other in every way and as most universal sense as I can phrase that. I think most of you are here and you resonate with this material because that resonates with you, and we will over the next little bit delve into it some. I do recommend, and some of you have asked because I have referenced Kingsley in the past, if you were to get a book ahead of the curve to start reading to kind of prep for the conversation, Kingsley's, I believe, latest book, Catafalque, is brilliant, and it will take you a while to work through. And especially if you are one of those individuals who have come to thinking you have an understanding of Jungian psychology because of what certain sorts of people have told you, well, Kingsley's going to blow your foundations right out from underneath you and expose much of that crap as very nearly fraudulent. But the message there is essential to, as far as I can see, a healthy navigation of the moment. So if you are up for that, please go pick yourself up a copy of Catafalque, because it'll be well worth your time and it'll make a lot of what I'm talking about more relevant to you. Anyway, just a quick note here and some thoughts immediately having gotten back. I got to kind of finish up with my cleanups around here, and we'll get back at it. Cheers, people.